Every weekend, millions of people gather around televisions, wear team jerseys, paint their faces, and ride an emotional roller coaster depending on the outcome of a game played by athletes they've never met. A victory can feel exhilarating, while a loss can ruin someone's entire evening. Yet at the same time, there is another large group of people watching this spectacle from the outside, feeling completely indifferent. They see the excitement, the shouting, and the celebrations, and simply don't understand the appeal. Interestingly, neuroscience suggests that this difference may come down to how our brains are wired. Not caring about sports doesn't mean a person is dull, passionless, or disconnected from life. It doesn't indicate a lack of enthusiasm or energy. Instead, it may reflect a different way the brain processes belonging, excitement, and meaning. While a large portion of people passionately follow sports teams, others simply don't experience the same emotional reaction. Their brains respond differently to the entire situation. To understand why sports are so captivating for many people, it helps to look at human history. For thousands of years, survival depended heavily on belonging to a group. Early humans relied on tribes for protection, hunting, and cooperation. Being part of a collective wasn't just comforting, it was essential for staying alive. Over time, this instinct to belong became deeply embedded in the human brain. Modern sports can tap into that same ancient instinct. A sports team essentially becomes a modern version of a tribe. Fans adopt the team's colors, symbols, and traditions. They celebrate victories together and feel disappointed when their side loses. During these moments, the brain releases oxytocin, a hormone associated with bonding and social connection. It's the same chemical that strengthens emotional ties between friends and family. In other words, the brain can begin to treat a sports team almost like an extended social group. However, not everyone experiences this tribal pull as strongly. Some people naturally have lower tribal identification, meaning their sense of identity isn't tightly linked to belonging to large groups. Instead of defining themselves through group loyalty, they lean toward individualism. Their sense of self doesn't rely on supporting a team or being part of a collective identity. As a result, sports fandom simply doesn't resonate with them in the same way. Research has supported this idea. Studies have shown that individuals with little interest in sports are less likely to adopt an us versus them mindset. In sports culture, rivalry is a major part of the experience. Fans sometimes feel a strong emotional divide between their team and its opponents. For someone who isn't naturally drawn to group competition, that emotional investment can seem unnecessary or even strange. The brain chemistry involved in sports fandom is also fascinating. Watching a close game triggers the release of dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with pleasure, anticipation, and reward. The feeling is similar to the excitement you experience before opening a gift or achieving a goal you've been working toward. For sports fans, each play in a game can produce small bursts of anticipation. Will the team score? Will they defend successfully? Will something dramatic happen in the final seconds? This constant uncertainty keeps the brain engaged. Each moment offers the possibility of reward, which makes the experience highly stimulating. Brain imaging studies have revealed that watching a favorite team compete activates reward centers similar to those involved in gambling and other highly engaging activities. The unpredictability of sports outcomes plays a key role here. Because fans never know exactly what will happen next, the brain continues releasing dopamine in anticipation. Psychologists refer to this pattern as intermittent reinforcement. It's the same principle that makes slot machines addictive. Rewards appear unpredictably, which encourages the brain to keep seeking the next positive outcome. The brain becomes hooked on the possibility of the next exciting moment. For people who don't care about sports, this neurological loop simply isn't triggered. Their brains don't interpret spectator competition as rewarding in the same way. Instead of feeling anticipation and excitement, they often feel neutral or even bored. Interestingly, genetics might also influence this response. Some research suggests that variations in dopamine receptor genes can affect how strongly individuals respond to competitive spectator activities. In simple terms, the level of excitement someone feels while watching sports may partly come from their biological makeup. Another psychological concept related to sports fandom is something known as basking in reflected glory. This occurs when fans associate their identity with the success of their team. After a win, supporters often say, "We won," even though they didn't participate in the game themselves. But after a loss, the language shifts slightly. "They lost." The subtle change in pronouns creates emotional distance from failure. People who aren't deeply invested in sports tend to avoid this pattern. Their sense of achievement and identity usually comes from personal accomplishments rather than the success of an external group. Because their self-worth isn't connected to a team's performance, their confidence often remains more stable. That said, sports fans can also display positive psychological traits. Research has found that passionate supporters sometimes score higher on certain measures of empathy. When they follow a team closely, they develop emotional concern for players' successes, injuries, struggles, and victories. They celebrate achievements and feel disappointment when athletes face setbacks. So why don't non-sports fans show the same level of emotional involvement with athletes? The answer may lie in how people distribute their emotional energy. Everyone has a limited capacity for deep emotional investment. People who aren't drawn to sports often direct their empathy and attention elsewhere. For example, they may devote more emotional energy to social causes, artistic expression, intellectual exploration, or close personal relationships. Studies have shown that individuals with little interest in sports often score higher in openness to experience, a personality trait linked to curiosity, creativity, and appreciation for art, music, and beauty. In other words, both groups are seeking similar psychological rewards: excitement, meaning, and emotional connection. They simply pursue those rewards through different activities. There can also be personal reasons why someone avoids sports culture. Perhaps they had negative experiences during school athletics or felt excluded from sports-centered social circles. For some individuals, competitive environments can feel uncomfortable or intimidating. In those cases, disinterest in sports might develop as a way to distance themselves from those feelings. For others, the explanation is far simpler. They just find sports uninteresting. Not every activity appeals to everyone, and that's perfectly normal. Another reason sports fans and non-fans sometimes struggle to understand each other comes down to how they interpret stories and meaning. Sports provide a powerful narrative structure. There are underdogs rising to victory, legendary rivalries, dramatic comebacks, and historic dynasties. Each season creates a new storyline filled with suspense and emotional highs and lows. Fans enjoy watching these narratives unfold in real time. The unpredictability makes the experience exciting. It feels like witnessing a live drama where the ending is never guaranteed. People who aren't interested in sports often view this randomness differently. From their perspective, investing emotional energy in a game played by strangers may seem pointless because it doesn't directly affect their personal lives. Instead, they may seek meaning in other forms of storytelling: novels, films, creative work, relationships, or intellectual discovery. Psychologists sometimes describe this difference as parasocial investment versus direct engagement. Sports fans build one-sided emotional relationships with teams and players they follow. Meanwhile, non-fans often prefer investing their emotional energy in activities where their involvement directly influences the outcome. Neither approach is inherently better. They simply represent different ways of experiencing life and finding fulfillment. Another interesting observation is that people who aren't deeply invested in sports often report feeling more present in their daily routines. Instead of spending several hours each week emotionally invested in events they cannot control, they focus more on their own activities and goals. This perspective can feel empowering for some individuals. Rather than observing someone else's competition, they direct their energy toward their own challenges and achievements. Ultimately, the difference between sports fans and non-fans isn't about intelligence, personality, or enthusiasm for life. It's about how different brains seek excitement, belonging, and meaning. If you've ever felt out of place when everyone around you was discussing the latest game while you had no interest in the outcome, there's nothing wrong with you. Your brain may simply be wired to find fulfillment in different places. The next time someone asks if you watched the game and you honestly couldn't care less, remember that you're not missing out on a universal human experience. You're simply engaging with the world through a different lens, one where your passions and interests follow a different path.